On a silent night, a mystery begins to unfold. The story is rooted in the ancient legends of the Majapahit kingdom. Forbidden rituals have been a dark secret for centuries. An ancient graveyard hidden behind a dense forest holds a spooky tale. The villagers believe that ancestral spirits still roam. The story begins in a small, remote village. The village was surrounded by mystery and mystical beliefs. Every night, a thick fog envelops the land. The silence of the night always brings a tense atmosphere. A young man named Aditya lived in the village. Aditya was known as a brave and curious young man. He was always interested in ancient mythological stories. Aditya has a family background rich in history. His grandfather was a royal guard during the glory days of Majapahit. Stories of forbidden rituals were passed down through generations. Every generation hears the frightening tale. The myth became part of the village's cultural identity. Tonight, the wind carries a secret whisper. Aditya feels something different in the air. He hears strange noises in the distance. The village was enveloped in unexpected tension. Residents start telling stories of shadowy apparitions. Legends of forbidden rituals came back to haunt. The old trees swayed even without wind. That night, the sky seemed to hold a dark secret. Aditya decided to investigate further. He felt called by a mysterious force. Traces of history called him to an ancient graveyard. The graveyard was believed to be the gateway to the supernatural world. The myth of forbidden rituals always evokes fear. However, Aditya's courage transcended fear. He began his journey with strong determination. The first night of his quest was full of uncertainty. The footprints on the wet ground were silent witnesses. Aditya stepped slowly into the dense forest. The forest was known as the place where time stops. Each step brought him closer to the truth. The shadows of the trees danced in the moonlight. The sound of night insects accompanied his steps. In the silence of the night, Aditya's mind was filled with doubts and hopes. As he walked, Aditya recalled a story his grandfather once told him about a miracle and a curse. The story always made his heart flutter with a mixture of fear and amazement. Every word in the story exuded a mysterious aura that was hard to forget. In the darkness of the night, the story flowed like an endless river. The sounds of nature in the forest seemed to sing a song of deep sadness. The sound of rustling leaves brought memories of a secretive past. Aditya felt that night was the right time to dig deeper into his family's history. He believed that there was a hidden truth behind the stories. The legends of forbidden rituals always left unanswered questions. In Aditya's mind, these questions cast dark shadows. The villagers also harbor a deep fear of the supernatural. They believe that the spirits of their ancestors are watching over them. Respect and fear are mixed in their every step. In the quiet of the night, everything feels more real. The night breeze carries secret whispers that are hard for ordinary ears to hear. Aditya heard voices that seemed to be calling his name. His heart was pounding, but he moved on with confidence. He knew that this journey would change his life forever. The moonlit path seemed even more mystical. Every corner of the forest held an untold story. The smell of wet soil and leaves made him feel even more lost. Aditya felt as if the world was opening a secret door for him. He began to feel an invisible presence. In the distance, shadows moved with strange movements. The atmosphere became even more tense when the sky turned pitch black. That night, the forest seemed to be a silent witness to the passage of time. Tradition and legend merged in the mesmerizing rhythm of nature. Aditya realized that every step brought him closer to the truth. He remembered his grandfather's message to always be careful. His grandfather once said that the truth often hides in the shadows. That message kept echoing in his mind. With steady steps, he approached the long-told location. The ancient graveyard at the center of the mystical story came into view. The worn stone architecture told stories of the past. The carvings carved into the stone display secret symbols. The symbols seemed to be the key to another dimension. Aditya's heart was filled with curiosity. He felt a strange vibration in the ground beneath his feet. It's as if each stone has an unspoken story. Behind the silence of the night, there is the mysterious music of nature. The sound of gurgling water from a small river adds to the magical atmosphere. Between the trees, the moonlight danced softly. Aditya felt as if he was on the threshold of another world. Every breath he took carried a different energy vibration. He began to ponder about the meaning of the existence of this forbidden ritual. Was the ritual a mere myth, or was there a hidden truth? The thought disturbed his burning curiosity. He continued to walk while grasping his strong determination. Beyond the thick fog, an old, forgotten building was visible. It looked like a mute witness to history. Aditya approached carefully while observing every detail. The atmosphere became increasingly tense as he approached the building. The cold stone walls held the secrets of ancient times. In every corner, there were ancient paintings that told stories of ancestors. Myths and history blended into every stroke of time. Aditya felt as if he was touching living history. He was mesmerized by the beauty and darkness that enveloped the place. Amidst the silence, the sound of his steps could be heard clearly. Each step carved an unforgettable journey. In front of the graveyard, there was a large door that was tightly closed. The door was decorated with mysterious ancient symbols. The symbols seemed to have a power of their own. Aditya felt a tremendous energy from the door. With a pounding heart, he tried to open the door. A crackling sound filled the air as the door began to open. A cold breeze greeted the adventurer's presence. Behind the door, there was a secret room that had never been seen. It was filled with a dark aura and eerie energy. The incoming moonlight created strange shadows. Aditya was stunned at the unusual sight. In the secret room, there were stunning ancient artifacts. The artifacts emitted a mysterious, dim light. Each artifact seemed to tell a story of the dark past. Stories of forbidden rituals began to flow in his mind. He felt the presence of long-buried spirits. The spirits seemed to be seeking justice. Aditya felt compelled to unravel the mystery. With growing determination, he stepped into the secret room. Each step carved a trail of extraordinary courage. In the room, there was a large stone altar. The altar was filled with unexplained symbols. On top of the altar, there was an ancient inscription that was almost faded. The inscription told about the rituals performed by the ancestors. Aditya read the inscription carefully. Every word in the inscription carried a deep meaning. The hidden message in the inscription revealed a great secret. The secret had to do with the existence of the supernatural world. He felt that his life was now bound to that mystery. In the silence of the night, everything seemed so fragile. Shadows of the past and the future seemed to collide. Aditya contemplated the meaning of struggle and sacrifice. He realized that this journey was not just about knowledge. It was about self-discovery and courage. The adventurous spirit grew stronger within him. His heart and mind were filled with hope and fear. Inside the secret room, he felt an unexpected vibration. The vibrations seemed to call her into another world. The sounds of nature and the whispers of spirits filled his heart. Aditya could not contain his burning curiosity. He decided to continue his search to a deeper place. Behind the altar, there was a narrow secret passage. The passage seemed to lead to the depths of the ground. With hesitant but determined steps, she stepped inside. Every corner of the hallway held a shadow of the past. The walls were engraved with ancient symbols. The dim light that emanated made the atmosphere even more gloomy. Aditya felt that time had stopped in the hallway. The eerie silence seemed to reveal the secrets of nature. At the end of the hallway, a small dark room was seen. The room looked like a secret hiding place. Inside, there was an old, worn wooden table. The table was filled with ancient manuscript scrolls. The scrolls told the history of forbidden rituals. The faded ink of the manuscripts indicated their great age. Every word in the manuscript held a profound message. Aditya realized that the manuscripts were clues to understanding the rituals. The clues gave an idea of the hidden power. He felt that the manuscript was the key to unlocking great secrets. Carefully, Aditya unrolled the manuscript. Each sheet of the manuscript seems to speak of a forgotten past. The words of the manuscript carry a haunting message. The message spoke of courage and sacrifice. Aditya began to feel a deep connection with his history. In an instant, he realized that his fate was tied to the ritual. His heart rumbled between infinite fear and hope. After reading the scroll, Aditya realized that the prophecy was not just a myth. The prophecy warned of dark forces rising from the depths of time. The words of the manuscript echoed in his mind, drawing him into deeper darkness. Aditya's heart pounded as he realized the stakes were high. The atmosphere in the secret room began to change with the presence of an unusual energy. In his heart, he wondered if he was ready to face the consequences. However, the determination to find the truth overcame his fear. With hesitation but also courage, he expressed his readiness to undergo the ritual. The man nodded as if accepting Aditya's courage as a test. He then handed over an ancient amulet carved with sacred symbols. The amulet was believed to withstand the dark forces during the ritual. Aditya accepted the amulet with trembling hands. In his heart, he felt that the amulet was the key to survival. The man then disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a tense silence. Aditya now stood alone in the center of the mysterious room. He realized that the ritual he was about to perform was not just an attempt to break the curse, it was also a test of his courage and faith. Every second felt like a dance between life and death. Around her, ancient symbols glowed with a faint light. The light shone on the faces in the paintings, which now looked more alive. Aditya felt as if the past and the future were colliding here. He recalled the stories his grandfather had told him, stories about the sacrifices that must be made to drive away the darkness. With his heart racing, he began to prepare himself for the ritual. Every movement felt like the fate had been written in the stars. Aditya lit a small candle beside the altar. The flame danced gently, creating shifting shadows. The soft sounds of the room seemed to accompany his every step of preparation. He unrolled the scroll to search for ritual instructions. The ancient words flowed through his mind like a sacred mantra. Aditya carefully read each line that contained the ritual instructions. Hidden among the words were the instructions to begin the ceremony. The instructions mentioned that the blood of ancestors should be poured out as an offering. Aditya was shocked to hear such a heavy requirement. He thought about the tragic stories that had befallen his family over the years. Every sacrifice in the story had a deep impact. Nonetheless, he knew that this was the only way to break the curse. With trembling hands, she carefully scrutinized the instructions. Her heart was full of doubts, but she felt there was no other choice. Step by step, she began to prepare the ritual. Around the altar, she arranged the symbols according to the script's instructions. Each symbol was placed with great care and respect. Aditya felt the weight of history on his shoulders, yet he forged ahead with determination. He knew that this ritual was the final test he had to face. The atmosphere grew tense as the air around him began to vibrate. The vibration seemed to announce the arrival of a greater power. Aditya stared at the altar with determined eyes. He recalled the message of his grandfather, who always emphasized the importance of courage. The message echoed in his mind as he gazed at the symbols. Each symbol told a story of a long and painful sacrifice. Aditya felt the presence of ancestral spirits who were now watching over his steps. The figures seemed present to guide him through the darkness. Amidst the silence, he began to chant the mantras written on the script. The words of the mantra flowed from his lips in an almost inaudible voice. Each syllable seemed to vibrate the air around her. Aditya felt that the mantra opened a door to the unseen world. The air changed, as if responding to the power of the sacred words. The shadows around him began to move in rhythmic unison. Each shadow danced to the soul-stirring sound of the mantra. In that moment, he felt the presence of a power greater than himself. The power seemed to test his courage that had been honed for a long time. Aditya felt that time seemed to stop in the middle of the ritual. Every second passed with a deep and mysterious impression. The room was now filled with an indescribable energy. The supernatural voices were getting louder and louder in unison with the rhythm of the mantra. Aditya felt that every word he spoke was changing his fate. His heart was pounding, but he moved on with confidence. The ritual he began was a battle between light and darkness. Before him, the fate of his family depended on the success of the ceremony. Aditya realized that every sacrifice has a very high price. He pondered on the meaning of true sacrifice and courage. In the deepening silence, mantras continued to flow from his lips. Each word formed a bridge between the real world and the supernatural. Aditya felt the energy flowing from the altar throughout the room. The energy seemed to invite the spirits of the ancestors to rise up and testify. With teary eyes, he watched as the shadows of the spirits began to appear. The spirits looked frail but full of sorrow. They recounted the suffering that had long been hidden behind the curse. Aditya listened with a broken heart and empathy. He realized that to break the curse, sacrifices had to be made with all his heart. Each spirit that appeared delivered a message of penance and renewed hope. The atmosphere became increasingly tense as the energy in the room reached its peak. Aditya felt that he was on the threshold between life and death. At that moment, the guardian spirit appeared in a much more terrifying form. The guardian spirit had an aura of overwhelming power and eyes that glowed red. He warned Aditya that this ritual had unforeseen consequences. The guardian spirit voiced the threat that if the sacrifice failed, a curse would destroy everything. Aditya felt a deep fear enveloping his entire soul. However, beneath the fear, his resolve to end the suffering grew stronger. He declared that he would continue with the ritual despite the consequences. In a firm voice, he repeated the mantra while staring at the altar with great courage. The energy from the altar exploded in blinding sparks of light, signaling the culmination of the ceremony. Aditya stood in the center of the secret room with his heart still racing. The energy emanating from the altar enveloped the entire room. All the gathered supernatural powers created a terrifying aura. Spirit voices began to rumble in the silence of the night. Aditya repeated the mantra he had learned from an ancient text. Every word he uttered seemed to open the gate between the real world and the supernatural world. The light from the altar glowed with incredible intensity. The figure of the guardian spirit reappeared, more terrifying than ever. The guardian spirit had a sharp, angry gaze. It declared that the promised sacrifice must be redeemed with blood and soul. Aditya felt an infinite weight on his shoulders. He knew that his life and the fate of his family depended on the outcome of this ritual. The walls of the room shook with unexpected force. A deep rumbling sound seemed to vibrate the souls of the hidden inhabitants. Shadows began to dance wildly along the walls. Aditya looked at the altar with burning determination. Every second felt like a struggle between life and death. He felt that death was near, but his courage did not falter. The ancient altar radiated a heightened energy. The long-standing ritual was now reaching its culmination. Amidst the chaos, Aditya remembered his grandfather's message of true courage. The message strengthened his heart to face the unseen enemy. All around him, the ancestral spirits begin to speak in a language he doesn't understand. They demanded justice for the long-standing suffering. Aditya felt the vibrations of the power of his ancestors. He realized that today was a time of atonement for past sins. The night sky seemed to cry with the rain that began to fall heavily. The water droplets merged with the sweat on Aditya's face. The eyes of the spirits radiated deep anger. Aditya knew that he had to sacrifice something very precious. He pondered over the sacrifice he would have to make. Her heart trembled between the desire to survive and ancestral duty. Across the room, the altar blazed with an intense red color. The guardian spirit approached with terrifying speed. The power he carried made the room feel even more cramped. Aditya held up the ancient amulet that had been given to him by the man before him. It glowed as if it were his only protection from the dark forces. He felt the soothing warmth of the amulet. With the amulet in hand, Aditya repeated the mantra more emphatically. Every word he uttered united the forces of the real and supernatural worlds. The energy around him grew more intense, vibrating every particle of air. The guardian spirit let out a deafening scream. The scream echoed into the recesses of Aditya's soul. Aditya felt the vibrations of power rushing through his body. He stared at the guardian spirit with eyes full of hope and fear. In those eyes was a rejection of the evil that had happened. Aditya knew that this was the defining moment for the fate of the village and his family. The seconds passed quickly and grippingly. The tension reached its peak between the two opposing forces. Aditya sensed that time had almost stopped for a moment. In the tense silence, he took one more step forward. Aditya's legs felt heavy, but his heart remained strong. He felt that the power of the ancestors flowed in his blood. The ritual he had begun now increasingly demanded great sacrifice. At the end of the room, dark shadows began to gather. The shadows seemed to be dancing in a macabre rhythm. Each of their movements was reminiscent of a tragic story that had passed. Aditya summoned the courage to face these shadows. He tried to focus his mind on the mantra he had memorized. The sacred words flowed from his lips with electrifying power. The sound of the mantra seemed to be a warrior's chant against the darkness. The energy emanating from the altar formed a dazzling vortex of light. The vortex became a battleground between the forces of good and evil. Aditya felt that every word he spoke was a decider of fate. Shadows and light battle each other in dramatic silence. The ritual reached a point where the forces of the supernatural seemed to dominate. However, Aditya's determination to break the curse never faded. He knew that the sacrifice he made would bring peace. In the midst of the energy vortex, there was a mesmerizing flash of light. It illuminated the entire room with incredible intensity. Aditya was stunned at the magic that began to happen. The power of the ancestral spirits seemed to merge with the emerging light. The room that had been filled with darkness was now illuminated. The fearsome guardian spirit seemed to be struck by the light. The guardian spirit's face changed, revealing a deep doubt. Aditya sensed that this was the moment to make the ultimate sacrifice. He realized that only by sacrificing a part of his soul could the curse be lifted. With a heavy heart, Aditya repeated the mantra in a different tone. The words of sacrifice flowed from his lips with sincerity. Each syllable contained hope for a better future. The energy in the room began to change, becoming softer and hopeful. Aditya closed his eyes, letting the ancestral power flow through him. In the silence, he felt a coolness that soothed his soul. The dark shadows slowly shrank before the light of sacrifice. The guardian spirit looked tormented by the change in energy. He let out a long breath, as if releasing a heavy burden. Aditya opened his eyes and saw the symbols on the altar burning brightly. The symbols now showed signs of victory. The power of the curse began to fade away, along with the sincere sacrifice. The once terrifying rumbling sound now turned into peaceful strains. The once tense room was slowly filled with warmth. Aditya felt that the burden of the curse was slowly disappearing. The ancestral spirits smiled through the light that illuminated the room. They welcomed Aditya's sacrifice with eternal peace. The shadows of the guardian spirit shrank and disappeared into the darkness. Aditya felt relieved, though his heart was still wounded by the sacrifice. He knew that the path to achieving a new peace had opened. The village that was once shrouded in curse now began to feel a new hope. The cold night breeze turned cool and refreshing. The withered flowers slowly began to bloom again. Aditya heard a soft voice that seemed to convey a message of awakening. The message stated that his struggle was not completely over. Although the curse had been lifted, there were still mysteries to be solved. He felt that every sacrifice brought new responsibilities. The light on the altar continued to burn as a symbol of victory and sacrifice. Aditya stood tall, realizing that he had changed the destiny of his family. Everything that happened that night would be remembered for all time. He knew that his bravery had inspired many souls. The agonizing ritual had now turned into real hope. However, behind it all, there was a lingering question. Aditya sensed that there were remnants of dark forces that had not completely disappeared. The sacrificial ritual had opened a door to another dimension. Behind that door, there were secrets still hidden. The question made his heart flutter with anxiety. She wondered if this peace was only temporary. Nonetheless, she chose to believe in the newly emerging hope. The clear night sky witnessed the changes taking place. The stars seemed to be dancing to welcome the new awakening. Aditya stepped out of the secret room with a heart full of hope. He felt that his journey had reached a turning point. All the suffering and sacrifice had brought about a profound change. The village that was once drowned in darkness now shone in a new light. The villagers started coming out of their hiding places. They were mesmerized by the changes that had taken place in their neighborhood. Hope and revival were felt in every corner of the village. Aditya became a symbol of courage and sacrifice for them. His story spread from one generation to the next. Every story about that night is full of magic and mystery. Aditya himself felt that his journey had reached a climax. Even so, the question of the future remained hanging. He realized that the power of the supernatural world could not be ruled out. Some forces may still be lurking in the shadows. Aditya decided to continue to maintain a balance between the real and supernatural worlds. He promised to protect the village and his family from any threat. The decision was carved in his heart as a sacred promise. That night, the wind brought a faint but clear message. The message stated that there was a new test on the horizon. Although the curse had been lifted, the world was still full of mysteries. Aditya realized that his task was not completely done. He must continue to be vigilant against the forces that might return. In the stillness of the night, he heard a soft whispering voice telling him to keep going. The voice seemed to come from the ancestral spirits that maintain the balance of nature. Aditya nodded slowly, accepting the message with an open heart. He knew that every victory brought new challenges to face. The sacrificial ritual had become part of his family's history. Stories of the mysterious night will live on in memory. Today, the darkness has been driven out of the place. However, remnants of the dark forces can still appear at any time. Aditya was determined to be ready for any eventuality. He looked up at the night sky with hopeful eyes. The stars seemed to sparkle as silent witnesses to his life's journey. Every passing second reminded him of the sacrifices he had made. He felt that his life was now bound to a greater destiny. The power he experienced that night had changed his view of the world. He began to understand that a balance between good and evil must be maintained. Aditya repeated the chanting mantra with conviction. The words flowed from his heart along with the flow of light around him. The light seemed to symbolize victory over the dark forces. In that moment, he felt that the future of the village was assured. All the suffering he had endured had borne sweet fruit for future generations. Aditya smiled, feeling the peace he had longed for. He knew that his struggle had not been in vain and would be remembered forever. In the end, the darkness has been overcome by the light of sacrifice. Aditya's courage and sincerity became an eternal symbol for the entire village. The story ends with Aditya looking at the horizon, leaving hope and mystery still hanging for the future.